Okay, hello everybody. I'm going to do a little update video. Today is Saturday, I think November 28th, and it's the first video I'm making since I came back from New Jersey. And this morning I thought, man, I should try to update and teach. But I'll explain why I'm laying down. I'm working on a Saturday cleaning my garage out, and I'm stepping on like a little step stool. And as of about 15 minutes ago, I turned around and I dislocated my hip. And I've never dislocated my hip before. And I thought I'll sit down for 10 minutes. I couldn't, I fell down. And then I thought maybe I'll walk with a stick. I was going to grab like a cane. I couldn't. So I crawled into my back room. Now I'm like sitting around. So what I'm going to try to do is talk. I'll title this Dislocated Hip and Teaching. The pain is not real bad. I'll do a quick health update. It's interesting because I went into the doctor about a year ago. I made videos on this, and I said I need to get checked for some things. And I think they thought, they're good. The VA is good, but I think they thought that I was maybe paranoid. And of course, I went in, I forget, a year earlier or whatever. You have to, in the VA, it's a very good system, but you have to go in on a regular basis, which when I first got into the VA, I didn't know that. And they have a thing like you're on a certain team, blue team, yellow team, and they used to send me a lot of letters like, we've not heard from you in 2 months or whatever. And I got upset a little bit. I said, well, what do you mean? I said, I'll come in if I need to. They said, well, no, you have to come in regularly to stay in the system. And look, I'm busy, so I thought, and I told them honestly, I said, well, I appreciate that I have insurance with you, but I'm busy, I can't do that. So, but when I went back, they didn't kick me out, but you have to you got to go through a whole process either way. So, when I went in, whenever it was, they weighed me, and I could see they didn't want to say nothing. At first, I could tell the lady nurse was a fine lady, that at first she was like, oh, it's probably nothing. And then when she weighed me, I could see she didn't want to say nothing, I think I went from like maybe 170 to like 147 since the last time, which then they thought, okay, we'll do some tests on John. But either way, I feel fine, and I mention that because on this trip, airports and everything, look, I have a belt, that you put your belt in a certain loop, and I noticed, and it was because I'm carrying luggage. The only reason I brought luggage back, I'll show you, is I brought 2 suitcases of all the family pictures. That's all I brought back. I don't check in luggage when I fly. And so I brought all the family pictures back. That was all. I gave away everything in the house to Patrick, who lived there for many years. It was an ex-boyfriend, boyfriend of my sister who died. And I gave him my mom's car, and then the renter downstairs, I said, take whatever you want. So we'll see. I'm still settling on the house. But as I was hanging up pictures the last few days, and I don't know if you could see them. It was interesting because I saved some of the notes that we went through all the photos in my family, and I saved some of the notes. And my mom had saved, I have my old Catholic communion, first communion, where grandma and grandpa, my grandma Vito, and the families congratulated me. And of course, as a young kid, you don't remember those things. But I noticed they saved something. It's right there. And what it is, I'm glad I looked at the date before this happened. I finally had a chance to read it. What it is a sermon paper from 1984 at the Church of God in the hometown of 80-something Street off of Kennedy Boulevard. And the reason they saved that is when I visited that year, and I looked at the date earlier so I could read the verse, And I said, I bet you this is one of the Psalms I quote. They saved it from 84 because I preached. My dad had an invite for me when I used to go back to visit, and he knew I was in ministry. He, as a favor, he talked to the chaplain for the fire department. The chaplain's name was Reverend Wilkins, and Reverend Wilkins was a chaplain for the North Bergen Fire Department, which my dad retired from as a captain. So, as a courtesy, he said, son, the chaplain is going to let you, he invited you to preach at his church on that Sunday of 1984 when I was there. I said, okay, Dad. So they filled out the little sermon paper, very like a Church of God church, wonderful church, wonderful man. And as I read it, I hung it up the other day and I got to read the verse today. And it says, today's guest preacher will be John Chiarello. And I remember preaching. I had friends that came and heard me. And that's why my mom had saved it. But as I was going through it before I had a chance to read it, hanging these things up, it's one of the Psalms I quote. I will hear what the Lord God will speak. He will speak peace unto his people and to his saints, but let them not return again in the folly. Now, I quote many verses in my morning prayer and my evening prayer, and I do it constantly. It's a system. And I can go through the prayer time, and it's just a system. And that happens to be one that I quote every single day. I don't remember always the passage, the address of it. So before I got a chance to read it, I just had the beginning on there. I said, I bet you that's that verse I quote every day. And it was, and that was interesting. These are like signs. When I spoke that year at that church, I just preached the gospel message. It was just a plain grace message of being born again, saved through Jesus Christ. And the pastor, Reverend Wilkins, gave me like a thank you note. When I got back to Texas, I sent him one of my published copies of the first book I wrote. I had published copies from a publishing house in Nebraska. 1,000 copies. I used to give those books away. It's called House of Prayer, Den of Thieves. And I sent him that book as a courtesy. I used to send those books out for free to preachers and all over. And he wrote me a thank you note. He said, John, thank you so much. Because the book dealt with serving the Lord, but it's not outward fame and fortune and all those things. The book is still on my website. You can read it. It's talked about, humility, sacrifice, and so forth. And as a pastor in a wonderful church, he lived his life that way. So he told me he appreciated that book. And he did a favor by letting me preach, not knowing who I was, but I was the son of one of the firemen he was a chaplain to. Then many years later, on one of these visits, you see my videos, many years later, I went and knocked at the church parsonage right in the hometown where you just saw me a few weeks ago. And I didn't know if Reverend Wilkins was still alive or if he was still there. But he was. He answered the door. I rang the bell on 80-something Street off of Kennedy Boulevard. I said, Reverend Wilkins, my name is John Chiarello. Now, he did not remember me. I said, many years ago, Reverend Wilkins, I preached at your church. Now, he might have thought I was making it up because I don't know how many people. So, but it shows you his grace. As an older man, and his wife was, after I got in, she was in like Parkinson's or Alzheimer's late stages, and he was taking care of his wife. I'm sure he was in his 80s. So he still invited me in. And look, this was maybe, 15 years ago when I made that visit. And as we sat in his beautiful little parsonage, he has since passed away and gone on to be with the Lord. As I was talking to him, all of a sudden he said, I remember you. And it showed me that he still trusted, because it could have been a robbery, I was 40 years old, walking the streets looking like, he trusted. Then he remembered me. He said, I remember you. And his wife, she was like in the back room talking and all, and, it was just a wonderful experience. And that my mother saved that little church note. when I upload this, I'm going to crawl to my laptop to do this. But anyway, I don't think I'm going to make it over there. So I wanted to mention that. There were two things. I couldn't write the notes because I had to make it back to my room here. I wanted to mention, in a journal I wrote partially in New Jersey in the year 2012 or 2013. I was in New Jersey for 3 months, and it's up there, but I can't get it. But I wrote scriptures and things. I mentioned it on some of the other videos. But there's such an interesting thing in that journal, because I wrote a particular event that took place, and it was one morning in my yard here, and I used to be outside praying a lot. Now I actually still walk outside, but I pray laying in this spot. This is my study. This is my prayer spot now, and I kind of lay down when I pray. And that morning, I know the date, not by memory, but it's written in the book. I'll tell you why. That morning I said, we're not supposed to ask for signs. I said, but Lord, show me a sign. Let me see something. And I see many shooting stars when you get up early. You know, I get up now at 3:30 in the morning, but when you get up early and go outside, which I still do a little bit, but not as long, you see many shooting stars, all the star constellations and all. I'm familiar with them all by seeing them so much over the years. And it was always interesting because when I was in New Jersey and I'd get up early and go in the yard to pray, I'd see those same constellations. I said, look at that. Those are the same stars Abraham looked at. They are not, I taught a lot about Abraham on that trip or in the past, and God said to Abraham, look at the stars. If you're able to number them, so shall your seed be. And I've said, you know, it's interesting. The same stars Abraham seen, we can see today. There's not a lot of things, unless you've been to the Holy Land, but there's not a lot of physical things that today or tonight you can look at that the patriarchs, the heroes of the faith, looked at. But those are one of the things you can look at, as well as the sun and the moon and so forth. I always thought that interesting. So the morning I said, I had the date written down, the morning I said, let me see something today. As my habit was, looking at the stars, that morning I saw a supernova. And I thought, is it that? I never saw that before. Meaning, I was just looking at a bright star. It was not a shooting star. Those are different. And I was looking at it. Just so happened as I was looking at it, boom, it went out. I thought, that never happened before. What are the odds of seeing a supernova or a nova basically when a star dies? It just goes out. The odds of that are, why did I remember the date to write down? Later that morning, there were 3 events that took place in the heavens that same day. I do not know if anyone caught the supernova. Meaning, I'm sure we have people that look at those things, but I don't know if that was reported or not. But the other 2 events were reported that took place. The same day was the most viewed, videoed meteorite, or asteroid ever. Why? It came in, there was a meteorite, the term either asteroid, meteorite, but it came into the atmosphere in Russia. And I think it was called Irkutsk Mountains or something. And the reason it was so famous and the most videoed was because in Russia, many people have dash cams on their vehicles because of police abuse and things like that took place. So it came in so low that day that a lot of people recorded it on their car video cams. So that was considered the most viewed, but it was unexpected. And there was one other interesting event that happened in the heavens within that, I don't know if it was the same day. I think it might have been. There was an unknown, different asteroid or meteor or whatever that entered into the atmosphere. Now, the reason I remembered the date was it was documented in some magazines. I even cut out a picture of that particular day, and it was Russia. Now, when I wrote that in that journal, what's so significant about Russia? You know, there's so many scriptures. There shall rise a star out of Jacob, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be. In the birth narrative of Christ, the star, they followed, the wise men from the east followed the star until it came, and it actually says they rejoiced when they seen the star. Interesting. They rejoiced that they found Christ, the baby, but they rejoiced when they seen the star, meaning they were particular, there's whole studies on that, particular signs in the heavens that even in natural history, Caesars and so forth, that were associated with leadership rising. So there's scriptures. The one I think I just quoted was from a false prophet. It's in the Bible. I believe it was from Balaam. Bible students, Balaam was a false prophet. But I think he's the one that said, there shall arise a star out of Jacob, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be. A messianic prophecy. Now, why the big thing about Russia and putting it in? I had no Russian friends. I knew nobody from Russia. And in all the websites I do, it dawned on me, Russia are the biggest group of people. If you added one site called VK, which is Russian Facebook, there's about 7,000 people, friends of mine. And the other side is called OK, which is Russia and Ukraine combined. So they have about 4,500, meaning it's not a whole lot, but figure that's what, 7 and 4, 11,000 people. That actually is the biggest single group of friends on all these websites, Russia. So that was significant. I didn't know the significance of it. I didn't realize those things until time progressed. I didn't realize that on that paper was one of the Psalms that I would be quoting throughout my whole life. And it was on one of the sermon notes. So what we do, I won't go real long, what we do is follow the patterns that God gives to us. I was a little concerned that I kind of felt like I was getting a little skinnier. And I bought a big chocolate pie before Thanksgiving, not realizing, oh, it's going to be Thanksgiving, and there's going to be a lot of pies. But I just bought it as a whim because I got back and I'm dealing with all types of issues and settling the estate. And normally I thought I'll eat once a day in the evening. I eat once a day for many years. And I eat at about 8:30 at night. It's never changed, even when I was in New Jersey this last trip. But if I eat a big piece of pie at night like that, I could feel, oh, I'm going to gain some weight. And I didn't think I really gained any. And just, so I feel okay. It doesn't really hurt that much. It sidetracked me because I'm not going to make it over there. I had to crawl to my room here, which is a sidetrack for me. And if need be, I will crawl to get my laptop, which is back that way. And I'll upload this today. I do want to finish the Corinthian study. I believe the videos you saw on my trip, I believe that's my last New Jersey, New York City ones. This calendar, if you can see it in the back, that's a wall calendar that I hung up in New Jersey in 2012. That's a wall calendar from 2012. And I used to tell my mom, don't take it down, Mom, from the room that I used to stay in. And she left it up there. Then when I went back, I wrote all the dates down. I went to 2013, 2014, 15, 17, 18. I think it was 7 years, which was the conclusion of my trips. And I used to say, the last year I go, I'm going to bring that calendar. Because every year that I would go back, that calendar remained, and I just changed the year. I had to adjust the days. I did it this past November. I just changed November to 2020, and Monday was Tuesday or whatever, but so it was a memory, it was a commitment that I kept. If I could get up, I'd show you these interesting things. I went through all the pictures, 2 suitcases of pictures, and there was one, it's right up there. And my mom, maybe Patrick, took a picture of a beautiful rainbow in front of my house in New Jersey. And it was just, I'm sure my mom saw it and said, oh, Patrick, maybe can you take that picture for me on your phone? But either way, there was just one, the rainbow, significant scripture for Bible students. So this will be a teaching. I would encourage people. Many scriptures. I like to walk when I teach. I sought the Lord and He heard me and He delivered me from all my fears. Jacob in the Bible, famous story. He wrestled with God, and then his hip went out of joint, and it was a sign, that God. There's a lot of teachers that have taught on the story of Jacob, but it's like God uses people, and oftentimes there are wounds. I read one of the scriptures I wrote down that are in that back room. It says, I was wroth with thee for a moment. I think it's Isaiah. But in my mercy I had compassion on you. Therefore, your seed will expand and you will have a great influence. The process of the dealings of God in our lives is oftentimes God says, now I'm going to bring you through a period of judgment or a period of difficulty so I can fulfill my will. Isaiah 53, I pray for the prisoners on a regular basis. All these cases you see, and now I don't buy the newspaper, so I'll read them on the phone when I'm looking at the news. And Isaiah 53 says, because you have poured out your soul, you made intercession for the transgressors, were numbered with them. Therefore, you're going to have this messianic prophecy, Isaiah 53. But it's like if you identify with the down and out, with the prisoner, with the hurting, it's in that identification that God, will give you great increase. Many, many years, a lot of Christians, we're going to wrap this up. This will be a teaching video. I think I quoted enough that it would qualify. Many years I spent with my friends in the street. And it wasn't, I see them still, but not as much. But it was never a, burden to do that. I remember when I first moved to this area of Corpus Christi, it's called Flower Bluff, I didn't know that there was a very large homeless population. And I told one of my friends, I seen him the other day, we call him New York, he's homeless, from New York. I know New York, I seen him the other day. I told him, I said, New York, I said, he was dumpster diving in town. I said, I got the dollar for you, brother. I said, a lot of people, they have animosity towards the homeless for various reasons. I said, when I first moved to where I moved to in Corpus, and then I realized after a few weeks, I told my wife, this is great. There's so many homeless people that I can work with. I saw it as, well, what a great opportunity. And there's a lot of ministries that are being challenged because of the particular things going on in December of 2020, November of 2020, dealing with a pandemic and so forth. And it's causing people to question, because in some cases, the structures of ministry and church and all are changing. But the simplicity, I think the answer to a lot of pastors that are seeking God are all over, because maybe attendance is down, maybe income is down, offerings are down, all those things. The answer, I think, to a lot of you is it's the paradigm shift of what you see and perceive as church and ministry. And I say that not to be negative. I say that to be encouraging, that the challenge has caused many people to maybe not focus. This real estate deal and the selling of my mom's house is the first one I've done in many years. And in all the dealings, I've been giving rooms away. I had to get a lawyer. I didn't need to. I had to. I normally don't use them. And then the signing of contract, I said, well, there's some things, John, I'm going to change because they're asking you to pay for these things. And in New Jersey, the buyer pays, not the seller. And I said, oh, I don't care. I said, what is it, a few thousand? I said, I don't really care. I don't care. And then he said, well, John, this is like the way it works. I said, okay, if you want to change it, I don't care about a few thousand. I'm glad I gave away everything in the house, okay? Some might be upset. I kept the valuables, all the pictures. The car, I could have used the car, but I felt like, let me give it to Patrick. Because he lived there for many years, and he helped my mom. He was just, maybe like a stepbrother, but I get into it with people, you know. I'd like to show you that over there. Let's see. I think I can do it. So today, look at all those pictures. This has never happened to me before. I've injured myself, but that I have never dislocated my hip. I have a very high threshold for pain. The pain is not a problem. It's doing this that's the problem. Look at that. Now that's the original thing I will hear what the Lord God will speak. Now that's Psalms, what, 85 something? And when I saw it, I said, I bet you that's the one I quote. But it wasn't until I read it in the Bible that it was the one. Let's see. Now here's the church schedule. It was Community Church of God, 82nd Street and 5th Avenue. Reverend Welcome's meditation, and then it says guest speaker, John Chiarello. And my dear mom, they saved that. And they have a picture of me. Look, it's right there. This was me preaching there. That Sunday. They saved that picture. I got it when now these are all, that's my beautiful mother. That's my sister. If I could stand up, I wanted to keep the ones that were important. That's my mom and dad. Look at that. When they got married. That's my dad in the Korean War. It's my sister. I don't know if that's me and my sister. I hope you've seen them. Oh, there's one up there. It's beautiful. I won't be able to stand to show it to you. It's my mom and sister. I never saw that one before. Okay, and these are the old things. So this hopefully will be a benefit. I usually talk about 30 minutes. And look, that's the calendar. That's the rainbow picture. All right, what I encourage everybody is this it's going to be about the time I usually end it. I'm going to end it. There's another interesting, very, very interesting, more so than even most of what I just told you, that I feel some of those things are interesting. But the other one, it would take me a good 15 minutes because it's so strange. I would have to explain it. And I would have to give you some scriptures. And it's even more interesting. It's more miraculous than most of the things I've shared. Okay? So in this Saturday, I want to bless you guys and pray that you would, in this time, just see, when you look at the ministry of Jesus, those were some of the thoughts. I'm 58 now, and I have a lot of good friends that are in ministry and been in ministry for many years. But look at the ministry of Jesus. Most of his ministry and teaching was all out in just the domain of where the Sea of Galilee, the areas we read about in the New Testament with his men. And there were a few occasions, as his custom was, and we read that later about one of the apostles too, would go into the synagogue. But if you will, the synagogue meeting was such a small aspect. All the great Sermon on the Mount, where was that? Was that in a pulpit at a synagogue? Okay. It was on the hills, on the shores, all the areas where he spoke and taught the great parables. Those were not taught in a building setting or a synagogue setting or, quote, a church idea setting. They were taught in community with his men, fishing and living and enjoying and having compassion, healing. So the paradigm shift, I would encourage you. I mentioned about the real estate deal. So I've done these before throughout my life. Not a whole lot, but I've done these. And you know, I feel like I had to do these things to settle affairs, but I don't let things distract me anymore. And if people call me or text me, or sometimes I can't, I try to stay focused. And when this happened, tragically, my mom passed away, and I was not upset at my dear mom. But then there were people that I had to deal with, and some very rude texts I got from family people and all. And normally I cut all that off, but I had to engage, and still have to, where I had no choice. So I got a little upset that I could have said, you know, I'm not going to deal with any of it. I'm not going to. I thought about that. I thought about saying, you know, I have a mission I'm on, but I thought, no, I'll go back, do that. So I stayed there maybe 10 days. I sold that house. Not, it didn't take 10 days. I sold it like the day after my mom died. Then called a realtor because I was just there to settle and to leave. So I've done it before. I have the closing date written down there, but I don't like being distracted. And I would encourage people in ministry. There are many things that you can do. You can maybe be in other areas, maybe in real estate in ministry, maybe in business and ministry, and I did that. I worked for 25 years while I was in ministry, so you could say bivocational. But I always saw that when I was going to do more real estate, should I do more rentals? I had a little rental house I bought years ago, then I managed a few that my mother-in-law had, she invested in, so I was doing those things, and I sold that house, and I gave the money. The profit I got from the selling of the house, that was a rental house in Kingsville, I gave that money to the guys basically in Kingsville. I bought an old building. It was called the Kingsville Lumber Company. It was an old building. And I bought it at a, you know, it was a repossession. You had to go to the tax thing. And so I had the cash because I sold a rental house on Yoakum Street. And I gave the keys to the guys, Eliseo and others. I said, this is for you guys. I'm moving to Corpus Christi, but I'm going to leave this here. I'm going to come back. We'll do a big thing. But we had some problems. Then the tax thing and the building needed a lot of repairs. So eventually it didn't work out. But I felt like to be in the money aspect of everything would be a big distraction. That's what I felt. And so I would encourage you, maybe that's another thing the Lord will do. Listen, there are people that are wonderful Christian businessmen, Christian people. But when Jesus called his men and Peter and those, they left those wonderful business. The fishing business was one of the most profitable businesses at that time in the first century in Palestine. Okay? You have old, how do we know these? You have old encyclopedias that date back. And if you look at all the entries of fish, it shows you that that was a top market at that day. Meaning, when they left their nets to follow him, or the other things, they were leaving lucrative businesses and said, now we're going to follow me, Jesus, and I'll make you fishers of men. So there is a time where you say, you know what? I understand God blesses business people and so forth, but if I'm going to, the apostles gave themselves continually to the Word of God and prayer. So maybe there are other things that could be distracting some of you guys. I'm talking to leaders and pastors. And even my little dealings with closing up these affairs, financial dealings, dealing with having the bank and other things, it's a distraction to me. And I'm just doing it a one-time thing, just because I'm, you know, need to do it, all right? So I would challenge you on that as well. Look at this season of your life as God can refocus you. Enlarge the place of thy tent, and let them stretch forth the curtains of thine habitations. Spare not, lengthen thy cords, and strengthen thy stakes. For thou shalt break forth on the right hand and on the left. Thy seed shall inherit the Gentiles, make the desolate cities to be inhabited. Amen.